here's some fundamental principles about God in relation to a 12-step program. 1, all of us can choose our own conception of God. It's not at all prescriptive. 2, it needs to be a kind of a loving and kind and compassionate understanding of God, not a punishing, cruel, Old Testament, nasty, vindictive trickster God, because it's a sort of tool to bring you back to self-compassion. That's one of its functions. It's also a tool to help me to continually recognize that me and my personal happiness, my personal fulfillment, are not the apex of the human experience. Because as an addict, I have a tendency to prioritize pleasure and distraction above all else. If I'm not capable, I make my whole life about myself and what I want. So an understanding of God as a kind of unifying oneness, and a simple obligation towards kindness, self-compassion, self-care, and care and compassion for others is very practicable. Of course, that doesn't prevent anybody who doesn't believe in God from successfully working a 12-step program, but it helps me to have a kind of a priori understanding that everything I'm experiencing is through a very limited lens, and that there is unending scope for new perspectives, that the senses themselves, 5 limited windows into the world, are unlikely to exactly correlate to the total sum of information that's available to people. In the original configuration of the 12 steps, it says, we made a decision to turn our life and our will over to the care of God as we understood God. It's just a decision to embrace and accept the possibility that we don't know everything, that the whole world isn't domed by rationalism, that there are no further fields for investigation. Because for me, rationalism and materialism lead to individualism, they lead to nihilism. The God idea in the context of the 12 steps is the necessary acceptance of faith, the understanding that our capacity as human beings for knowledge is limited and the potential for knowledge is limitless. There will always need to be a bridge. There will always need to be a point where we face the abyss. Someone told me when our little baby, our first daughter, was born, the midwife said, she's like encased really now in darkness. She can hardly hear or see. Her senses will grow by 2 months this, by 3 months that. My wife said, I feel sad for her in there. But I realised that even though the facility of the senses increases in time, all of us are still living within those limitations, the limitation of sight, the limitation of the olfactory senses, the audible senses, and that we don't know what lies beyond the sensory realm. So my perspective of myself and my perspective of the world are constructs facilitated by sensory information. And if you're kind of happy in the world, then that's fantastic. But if you're not happy, then recognizing that it's a construct made up of limited information is a good starting point in your investigation into what the world could be, what your perspective could be. There's no point not believing in God and then being really bloody unhappy. I'm an atheist. Is it working for you? No, I'm fucking miserable. Well, then consider some other possibilities. If you're if you don't believe in God and you're perfectly happy, then there is no problem. If you're drinking if you're drinking and taking drugs every day and you're really happy with your life, then there's not a problem. This program's only applicable when you require a mechanic to move you from one state to another state, from unconsciousness to consciousness, from unaware to aware, from self-obsession, in my case, to an awareness of others and a willingness to serve others. So for me, the way that God functions in my life is primarily to give me an awareness of my relative insignificance, but that that doesn't stop me being worthy of love or beautiful because I'm part of the whole. I feel that in this age of rationalism, materialism, we have neglected some important tenets of religious ideology, that because of the obvious ways that religious institutions have been oppressive and have aided imperialism, colonialism, misogyny, racism, that we have forgotten that those aspects of religion are found elsewhere in human institutions and human systems, whereas the concepts of grace, compassion, love and service are essential spiritual ideas. They're not found in commerce. And even if you say, humanitarianism, well, humanitarianism is entirely resourced from those philosophical ideas. So the way that the function of God in a 12-step program is to kind of give us an easy interface with the unknowable that isn't fearful, because the role of fear and the presence of fear in addictive behaviour is it's a key and determining component.